Two strippers in New York built a criminal empire worth millions. They targeted wealthy businessmen, drugged them, and drained their bank accounts. For years, nobody stopped them. This is the shocking true story of the scam that fooled New York's elite. Rosie was the daughter of a Cambodian immigrant family who grew up in Rockland County, New York. Abandoned by her parents and raised by her grandparents, she had turned into a rebellious young woman. Dropping out of school at 17 and starting to work as a waitress at a restaurant wasn't exactly a promising sign for her future. One night, a strip club manager sitting at one of her tables left her a $20 tip. Rosie stared at it for a long moment, and he suggested that if she wanted to earn more, she should stop by his club. That invitation would turn the young girl's life completely upside down. Rosie met with the man after that generous tip and job offer. The very next day, she lied about her age and started working as a dancer at a club called Lace. And that decision seemed to open up a glittering future. Because on her very first night, she took in between $500 and $1,000 in tips. An amount she would have taken nearly a month to earn at her old job. As time passed, she began building experience in Manhattan's dazzling nightlife. By the time she turned 18, she had become a stripper dancing at famous clubs around Times Square. Yes, she was still commuting to work in her old Honda. Yes, she still wasn't rich, but she was no longer the poor waitress girl either. The year things would really take off, 2007, would turn out to be quite good for her. It was around the time she started dancing at the well-known venue Hustler Club that she met the industry veteran Samantha Foxx. Also a New Yorker, Samantha was in her early 30s at the time, an old wolf by any measure. She was considered old in the world of stripping. She had been dancing in these venues since she was 19 for over a decade. I don't know if there's a specific type in this world, but if there is, Samantha looked exactly like it. A woman raising a child on her own, she had become one of Hustler Club's top earners over the years, thanks to a physique shaped by the industry. On top of that, the old wolf had a strategy of taking new and young dancers under her wing and working with them as a team, playing something of a big sister role. She was a woman who knew that a man could stay guarded when faced with a single dancer, but lost control when surrounded by 3 or 4 attractive women. For that reason, she worked in groups at the venues she danced in, hunting customers together. Since the earnings were far higher this way, everyone, meaning those new girls, wanted to work with Samantha. She guided the wealthy regulars who came to the club, maximizing both her own income and the tips of her teammates. Her targets were mostly Wall Street men who came in drunk and looking to have fun. There was a wild spending culture in the finance world of that era, fueled by prosperity. Financiers who had multiplied their market investments were blowing their money at these venues. This turned strip clubs into gold mines. An executive would come in and spend $500,000 in a single week, then leave. Another would come and do the same. With customers dropping $100,000 to $200,000 every visit, the dancers present on any given night were earning at the very minimum tens of thousands of dollars per shift. But the global financial crisis that would erupt in 2008 was about to bring the golden age of strip clubs to a dramatic end. For years, banks in the US had been handing out mortgages easily. A significant portion of these loans were high-risk loans that were very difficult to repay. Banks had packaged these risky loans and sold them across the world as investment products. As a result, the problem didn't stay contained to one bank. It spread throughout the entire financial world. Stock markets crashed, and the economic crisis erupted. The brokers crashed too. They no longer frequented clubs or threw money around. It was during this period, just as Rosie was shedding her amateur status, that she was forced to step away from the clubs for a while. She wasn't earning enough, and the tips she received no longer justified the work. Her moves during that fallow period weren't particularly wise either. She got pregnant by a boyfriend she had broken up with and reconciled with multiple times, got engaged, and brought a child into the world. But when the relationship fell apart and she found herself needing to stand on her own 2 feet again, she returned not to waitressing, but to the dance floors. Around 2009, she made her way back to Hustler Club. But an entirely different scene awaited her. Because Wall Street employees had pulled back from the luxury nightlife following the market collapse at the end of 2008, business was still quite slow. Her familiar co-workers were gone too. The dancer roster had been almost completely turned over. On top of that, a large number of Russian and Colombian women had entered the market. These women were doing everything for very low rates. Cheap labor had proliferated. Rosie was not a woman who sold her body, she only danced. But since the new girls were offering different services rather than just dancing, she didn't know what to do. Earning money just by dancing the old-fashioned way had gotten harder, and the competition for customers inside the clubs had intensified. But one name, the old wolf Samantha, was still there. Seeing a familiar, and above all, highly experienced face in that bleak environment did her good. Samantha had never left the business during that period. She had simply adapted to the bad market in a different way. She was no longer dancing on stage, but she was gathering girls around her and acting as a leader, marketing them to customers throughout the venue. Her method had changed somewhat, though. With the group of young girls she had assembled, she would cast lines at suitable men outside and bring them into the club, taking a percentage of whatever that customer spent for the evening. She had transformed into a peculiar kind of entrepreneur. It was obvious from her every manner that Samantha was making very good money this way. As the night wore on, Samantha and her crew would go in and out of the champagne rooms, walking out each time with satisfied smiles on their faces. When Rosie peeked through the doors, she could see customers sprawled half-conscious in their chairs. This scene was a sign that Samantha had found an opening. Now Rosie had a goal. She needed to join the team and learn how those men were being brought to that state. Once Rosie understood the truth, she wasted no time telling Samantha to bring her into the crew. And yes, the reason those men were in that state was that forbidden substances were being slipped into their drinks without their knowledge. This world wasn't exactly known for its ethical standards anyway. And so Rosie and Samantha joined forces and began their criminal partnership. Samantha had a wealthy client directory she had built up over the years, a list of phone numbers belonging to affluent men who had visited the club in the past. Every evening, Samantha began texting the numbers on this list, almost like a salesperson. She often couldn't even remember who was who, but she would send a flirtatious message and photo, probing whether they'd like to go out that night. When the men took the bait, the real scenario would begin. The mechanics of the plan were surprisingly simple. If the man Samantha had texted seemed receptive to the offer, crew members Karina and Marcy would first meet him at a respectable bar, loosening the mood with a meal and a few drinks. Then Rosie and the other girls would conveniently join the gathering, And from there, the target, now under the influence of several attractive women's attention and alcohol, would be asked to move to the club. Samantha had already negotiated with club management in advance. They received a set percentage commission of whatever that customer spent during the evening. The moment the customer walked through the door, Rosie and the girls would spring into action, getting the man to order bottle after bottle of champagne and running up the entertainment tab all the way to the last limit of his credit card. By the end of the night, within just a few hours, tens of thousands of dollars would have been charged to the dazed man's account. These charges would come back to the girls as commission. Of course, things didn't always go according to plan. Some of the men they met would say they had drunk enough and didn't want to go to the club, or they'd turn out to be cheap. That's when Plan B came into play. They would slip a cocktail of forbidden substances into the drinks they offered, making the man more compliant. This powder, usually composed of 3 different substances, would be sprinkled into the drink like a pinch of salt. And after that, bring on the drinks, bring on the credit cards. Over time, Rosie became a manager of this operation. She had assigned everyone their role in the crew, drawn up a nightly schedule, and started keeping a notebook where she recorded each customer's information. She was also the one who dealt with the banks. At the end of the night, when payments were being collected, she would speak with the bank representatives on the phone and get the transactions approved. She would get verification details, the customer's mother's maiden name, social security number, recent purchases, from the man while his mind was gone, and use them to authorize charges of $30,000 to $40,000. Once the cards were run, the night's haul was divided among the girls, but the shares weren't equal. Samantha and Rosie took the largest cuts, while girls like Karina and Marcy, who arranged the meetups, took smaller percentages. Club managers were also partners in the operation. Sometimes the girls would skip taking the men to the club altogether. They'd just take the card, run it through POS machines at their partner venues, and come back. In other words, they had all become fraudsters. Business was running like clockwork, and few people came forward to complain. When the man woke up in the morning, he couldn't even remember what he had done the night before. Even if he went to the police and said, "I went to a strip club and $10,000 was taken from my account," there wasn't much to be done. On top of that, most of these men held positions of status. They didn't want to admit to being swindled while they were enjoying themselves. The situation kept working in the girls' favor. Over time, Rosie and Samantha earned the title of Queens of the Strip World. In the eyes of the clubs, they were no longer worthless dancers. They were managers who packed venues with high-spending customers. They were driving hundreds of thousands of dollars in spending every week and filling their own coffers with cash. By 2013, they had more money than they knew what to do with, had expanded their crew, and were simply watching operations from the outside. 2 women who were supposed to be dancers had become the ringleaders of a gang that hired dancers and drained customers' cards. Luxury cars, homes, thousands of dollars worth of handbags and shoes had been acquired. At this point, they weren't even going to clubs anymore. For a businessman who wanted to have a good time, they would arrange a hotel room. The girls would put on a private show in the room, send the man's mind spinning, then take his card and run it through POS machines at partner venues. They had started offering the entertainment industry as an on-demand, in-room service. However, the difference in vision between the two inevitably led to clashes. When Rosie would say, Let's get a client to spend $20,000 a night. Keep him coming back. Samantha's position was, we've already knocked him out. Take the 100 grand and everyone go home. Rosie wanted to milk the cow, while Samantha wanted to slaughter it outright. For 4 years, no one had come forward to complain or file a report. But whereas they had started by defrauding people they personally knew who had money, as the names in the notebook dwindled, they were forced to work with new faces. Working with people whose habits they didn't know and whose backgrounds they weren't familiar with heightened the anxiety. Rosie, who had initially told herself she was doing this for her child's future, had also lost herself. She would talk herself into it every time. Once I've saved $100,000, I'll quit. When it hits $500,000, I'll walk away. Okay, I'm out at $1 million. But she would simply raise the target and stay at the center of it all. She would work through the night, come home in the morning to drop her child off at school, sleep, and then fall back into the same cycle at night. This cycle was bound to break someday. That day came when they set up someone named Fred. They sent the girls in and applied the usual routine. Lure, entertain, get him drunk, take the card, drain it. But Fred, to put it plainly, was a bit of a broken man. His wife had divorced him, he had crashed on the stock market, gone bankrupt, was in debt to banks, and had lost custody of his children. When he woke up in the morning and saw the figure on his statement, it became the final drop in a life already hanging by a thread. The girls had gone too far. They had maxed out his credit cards entirely. The man had nothing left to lose. For him, going to the police and telling his story, hiring a lawyer and exposing the situation, wasn't something he'd be ashamed of. Rosie felt sorry for the man when she heard his story that night, but Samantha suppressed her feelings. There's no room for pity in this business. As it turned out, however, the detectives this time chose to believe the man's story and put the girls under scrutiny. It was inevitable that a criminal network would emerge from the investigation. An undercover meeting was arranged, and police first caught the girls in a hotel room, then apprehended the gang's leaders, Rosie and Samantha. This was the end of the strip queens. In the investigation completed in 2014, the exact number of victims could not be fully determined, but the crimes were clear. Rosie, Samantha, and the other girls in the crew now faced a hefty dossier that included theft in various degrees, conspiracy, credit card fraud, assault with a controlled substance, and drug trafficking. It appeared that none of them were remorseful. Despite having turned on each other throughout the hearings that dragged on until 2016, and even though Rosie and Samantha's leadership roles and their arrangements with the clubs had been proven, each of them walked free on probation. Some would have to spend weekends incarcerated for 4 months. Others would perform a year of community service cleaning streets. Despite millions of dollars in fraud, due to the small number of witnesses and victims, not one of them received a full prison sentence. The shame of the defrauded men had once again let the criminals get away with it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating true stories and historical mysteries. See you in the next video.